Good evening, everybody. It seems like the joke's on me. First off, I hope everybody is safe and, everybody did not lose their power for too long, if anybody lost power during the storm. When we initially set the date for this meeting, I was very excited to welcome the sophomore class parents back into the building. I believe it's been a little while since you've had an in-person sort of grade level gathering. So I was really excited for tonight, and then it decided to snow, and I guess snow enough that we canceled school. So I'm sure the students had a good time today. I know I saw some sledding around town, but keeping in the theme with this decade or the past few years, we're being flexible and accommodating, and we decided to just keep the event going. We have some guests with us that I wanted to sort of honor their calendar and yours for that matter. And so here we are on Zoom. We've had some technical difficulties. You'd think after 2.5 years we would have figured this out, and frankly we have. I don't know what's going on, but we're here, we're on, and it's great to have you here. Historically, the sophomore parent night has consisted of highlighting some of the accomplishments of our students and hearing about their academic and extracurricular accomplishments throughout high school. And as great as it is to showcase our students and hear from them, we thought it would be more impactful and meaningful to you as parents to hear a little bit about what's happening in the classroom from us as the counselors. And we have Dr. Viviano, our high school psychologist, Tom Viviano, on the call. He too will be visiting the 10th grade classrooms this month with his psychology interns to present some information about stress management skills. And so, again, we redesigned this evening to highlight what's happening in class. We also have Tim with us from Bespoke. He is the founder and CEO. Thank you, Tim, for coming, and Emily as well for tagging along here. They're great partners with us. Tim is going to present some information towards the end about the changes or the upcoming changes to the PSAT and the SAT. We will also share with you, as I did earlier today through email, some dates to take a mock ACT or SAT, which we're going to do here in school. This will, I guess, kind of be the first time we're able to go back to in-person testing. So I'm excited about that. We also have with us Miss Tanya Fridovich. Tanya's been with us for the past month. She has been filling in for Ellen Cohn, who's been on medical leave and will be back later this month. So a jam-packed evening. I will just kind of wrap up my beginning remarks by saying we are planning another event in April. I can't promise it won't snow, but it is scheduled to be in person. We're going to do a mock college application admissions committee event. We're sort of in the early stages of planning that, so be on the lookout for sort of more information to follow. That'll be in April. And I will mention this in my follow-up email, but so Tim is going to present on some of the higher level changes to the SAT and the PSAT. And then in, I think it's 2 weeks, on March 14th at 7, he's going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into these changes and the differences between the SAT and the ACT. That too will be on Zoom. Information will go out about that, but I just wanted to put that out there now that this is really just like a sort of 30,000 feet overview from Tim, and we're going to get more into the nuances at a later date. So with that, before we get into sort of information about what we're doing in the classroom, Tanya is going to talk to you a little bit about our role in students' lives, just so everybody has the same understanding of who we are as counselors and the work that we do with your children.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. So we're just talking about the role of a counselor, and we just want to make sure all the sophomores know that it is important to continue developing the relationship with your counselor year after year. We provide 3 major services. The first is academic support. We help the students determine the best courses to take based on teacher recommendations and their own interests. We strive to help students become academically successful. We help with study tips and help with organization and time management. We help students develop self-advocacy skills. We encourage the students to communicate directly with teachers if any issues come up. We can assist with writing emails to teachers. We encourage them to attend extra help. We encourage them to form relationships with their teachers. We know it's very important that students learn these skills because in college they will not have that support available. The second major service we provide is social emotional support. So we encourage and assist students in joining clubs and sports, community service activities outside of school. We provide resources to help them feel connected to the school and local community. We also meet with students one-on-one at any point if anything comes up. And if needed, we refer students to Dr. Vivano and external resources. And then the third major service we provide is post-secondary planning. This month, we are going to be pushing into the 10th grade classes to start career exploration. We're going to introduce the students to My Learning. That's the site we use to search for and apply to colleges. Students are welcome to begin thinking about and exploring about college options this year. But next year, junior year, is when it becomes much more in depth. We're going to have junior workshops throughout the year and one-on-one meetings about college. And students are always welcome to come in. We have open door policies. Come in whenever you need us. They can reach us by email, phone, or come into the office. Same for parents.
Fantastic. Hi, everyone. Good to see you via Zoom. So I'm going to be touching on a little bit about how we define sophomore year, and in a word, that really is exploration. So that can happen both inside or outside of the classroom. This first bit is going to be outside of the classroom. So really want to touch upon the importance of clubs, right? Not only thinking about them in terms of the college process, but also just in terms of enrichment, right? How students are finding and fulfilling their passions within and throughout the school week. So our clubs uniquely meet during X block, which I know many of your students and many of our students across grade levels think is just an extended lunch twice a week, but it's really not. It's when our clubs meet. And so it's an opportunity not only for students to be able to strike a balance between doing some really cool stuff inside of school, as well as balancing it with a hectic outside of school schedule. But it also allows students to sort of get to know like-minded and similarly interested students during lunch. So socially a really great opportunity as well. If you know that your student, your child is not involved in a club, it is definitely not too late. There's a wide range of clubs ranging from a variety of different subject areas. We have a list in our office. I know there's a list posted in the high school website, and they're always looking for more students to join. So again, not too late. And if your student has any questions about clubs, definitely have them come see their counselor. Extracurricular activities outside of school, that can be a wide range of activities ranging from sports to, the sky's the limit. I'm always amazed with what our students sort of come in with. But again, just striking the idea of balance, especially when thinking about course selections, which I'll talk about in a second. Work, internship, and summer. So our department I think in a very impressive way, sends out this like mega document every year that I know has already been sent out that has a list organized by subject area of different programs, work experiences, and internships that are local and in the broader area and also online. So that can be to sort of help supplement or provide students with an idea of opportunities that are available throughout the school year or also during the summer. So if you did not get a hold of that list, definitely reach out to your child's counselor. We also have it posted on our website as well. But that's just a nice place to start. And again, the fact that it's broken down by subject area is always helpful. And we always get this question about summer. I think the idea is that your student should be doing something that they're excited about, while also taking into consideration that they're about to dive into junior year. So rest and relaxation is also important. This can be through a college course, right? Spending a little bit of time on a college campus, doing a week-long program or more, or it can be sort of thinking outside of the box. Students have come to me saying that they've biked across the United States. So really the sky's the limit, but just sort of making sure that it's in keeping with what your child is really excited about. And then lastly, exploration inside of the classroom. So we obviously have a core curriculum that we discuss in our course selection meetings, which if you haven't had your course selection meeting already with your child's counselor and your child, you will, where we basically talk about all options that are available in junior year. And so we talk about it in terms of subject area and in terms of rigor, and obviously keeping in mind the idea of balance. If for whatever reason your child is interested in studying a subject that we do not have as a part of our core curriculum, independent studies are always available. So that's available in the form of a half year or a full year independent study. And on the screen, you can see some really cool projects that our students have engaged in already. It's working with a teacher who that student does not currently have and really taking an in-depth dive into a subject area of their choice. So lots of flexibility and lots of ways for students to sort of think about things that they're excited to learn about. And now, Ms. H, you are up talking about discovery.
Yeah, so I wanted to dive in with everyone about our sophomore workshops that are going to be happening very soon. So basically, the counselors are going to come in twice to classrooms to have students complete a career interest inventory, specifically the Holland Code test. And it basically gives students the opportunity to like answer questions about themselves and explore like, you know, types of careers they could potentially be interested in based on their skills or strengths or interests. And then the results kind of pop up and it matches students with like career clusters that they can kind of dig into and think about, you know, how does this align with their current interests? Like, are they taking any classes in relation to these subjects? Like, have they ever thought about this subject before? It's kind of a good jumping off point for students to start thinking about like, okay, what might I want to major in college? Or like, what's my end goal for a career? So it's just kind of an introduction to career counseling and things like that. They'll also reflect on the interest inventory. So we provide them with like follow-up questions that they could kind of dive into. So they're not just like taking a test and then that's it. You know, we really want them to reflect on these things and think about like ways in which they can apply what they've learned about themselves. And then we have a career roadmap assignment, which I'll dive into a little bit more on the next slide. But that's a fun activity that, again, gets students thinking about career trajectory. And then after our 2 sessions with the counseling department, we have the school psychologist and the school psychology interns come into classrooms. And they're really focusing on lessons in relation to social and emotional well-being, which Dr. Viviano will dive more into. So on the next slide, I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a preview because your student will likely be coming to you within the next week or two to ask you about your career roadmap. So we ask them to interview a parent or guardian or just like an adult in their lives about what their career roadmap looked like. And while some trajectories are kind of this linear, like you went to college, you studied a certain thing, you know, that you always knew you wanted to do when you ended up in that career. A lot of times the path is more winding and you might have originally really wanted to do something and then changed your mind in college or had another experience that opened you up. So it's just an interesting way for students to kind of see, like, from someone in their life, you know, how did their career kind of happen, and many times it's always like an interesting story. And then, you know, we go in class, we share, you know, some of the career roadmaps, and then the students will complete some reflection questions as a result of that, and just thinking about like factors beyond interest, strengths, and skills, thinking about, you know, what are my family's expectations, or, you know, how did I kind of grow up, and like what was I kind of taught, like what expectations. So it's just an interesting way to kind of add that layer of like family factor and influence and things like that when thinking about, you know, career choice and major and things like that. So that's basically my summary on that.
Hi, everybody. I guess it's my turn. Happy to be here. And so I just want to to point out some of the things that we're doing specifically with those push-ins, with the social emotional elements. Again, as Ms. H pointed out, it's going to be myself and the interns, and we're really focusing on a couple of core skills that I found last year really resonated with the students. The first one being interpersonal effectiveness skills. So basically, there's this acronym DEARMAN. You don't really have to know what it all stands for because there's a lot of acronyms in the framework that we use, which is based on DBT. For those of you who are familiar, you might know it. If you're not, feel free to reach out. I can send you more resources about what that is. But essentially, it's just practical life skills that we could all benefit from. But I think this period in your students' kind of trajectory really helps them become more and more independent, as we hope that they are when they graduate with us. So the first one is, basically strategies to effectively communicate with another person to kind of get what you want, make a request that's going to be more effective than otherwise might be. So one example that they love, the students that is, and the teachers surprisingly love also, but when you hear the example that you might be surprised by that, but one of them is how to write an effective email to your teacher, describing your situation, and you might be needing an extension on a paper, or you have 3 tests on one day, and can I skillfully ask for those things that I think might be making me more effective. And again, the kids really resonate to that, and the teachers do too. The other examples, we try to get like a family parent one in there. So don't hate us, but asking for a later curfew or something like that, just asking like, oh, I want to go to this party, but it's grandma's birthday. How can I do both? So it's just like general communication skills that we're hoping that kids can take away in terms of just being a little bit more effective in the way that they communicate with others, especially when they kind of want something or need something. So that's the first major area. And then the second one we focused on last year, and again, it worked really well, which is emotion regulation. So within that realm, we have one skill called Cope Ahead, which I don't know about you, but sometimes it's easy to kind of avoid thinking about upcoming stressful situations. And this skill is all about confronting what's coming up and then acknowledging what feelings might be coming up when you're in that situation, whether it's having a difficult conversation with a friend, or a test that you're really anxious about, or talking to your teacher, again, kind of tying back to that other one, thinking ahead to what that might feel like, and then more specifically, what you might do in terms of skills. Like, what are you going to do to help you get through that situation? Because it's going to happen, right? We all know. And so we're really focusing on helping them develop a set of skills to confront that situation in a way that's going to kind of make it a lot better, because our philosophy is, stress and anxiety is a part of life, and it's how we deal with it that really makes a difference.
Thanks, Tom. It's actually a sort of a good segue to talk about class selection. So at the beginning of the month, we met with the students in the auditorium, and they heard from the curriculum leaders of each department to hear about what classes are available. And as Melissa mentioned, and as some of you are obviously well aware, we've been meeting throughout this past month with you and your child to talk about classes for next year. These are just things to keep in mind as you speak with your child about what they want to take junior year. I will say, in some ways, junior year classes are maybe the most important decision of junior year. And I say that because it sets the stage for sort of what you'll have left to take during senior year, right? To give that example in another way, last year, so this is last year's cohort of 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. So when your child was a 9th grader, last year, of the students that took an advanced placement class in 10th grade, the majority of them took one AP class. As 11th graders, the majority of students took 2 AP classes. And as 12th graders, the majority of students that, again, these are students that took AP classes, not everybody takes AP classes, the majority of students took 3 AP classes. So you want to set yourself up, number one, obviously for success, right? You do not want to take an advanced placement course or any of our courses that are more rigorous just because it's a rigorous class or just because it has the advanced placement title in front of it. You want to take classes that you're interested in, that you're curious about, and obviously something that like you feel like you can do well in. But going in line with this theme of like stepping up, you want to create a junior schedule that leaves you enough optionality for senior year. You don't want to go from 10th grade taking 1 to 11th grade taking 2 or 3 to senior year taking 1 or 2, right? You want to have the stairway building up so that the overall rigor in your courses continues to increase over time. And that, from a college admissions perspective, is what they're looking for, right? Have you done well, and have you consistently increased the rigor of your overall course load? They're obviously looking for which AP classes or how many AP classes or how rigorous your overall schedule is, but they also want to see that your performance over time is increasing as to is the rigor. And again, just these study skills and commitments outside of school, these are things to keep in mind when you're thinking about what classes to take. With that, I'm going to kick it over to Tim, which I think maybe Alyssa, that means you need to stop sharing. So as I maybe emailed and alluded to before, the PSAT in October of this year is changing. It's going to be digital. And then the SAT in March of 2024 will be digital. And all exams from the College Board that are SAT formats going forward are also going to be digital. There's some other nuanced differences that I'm going to leave to Tim from Bespoke, the expert, to dive into. So with that, Tim, it's all yours.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Aaron and the College Office, for having us here tonight to present. I'm hoping everyone can see the slides that I'm sharing.
Yes.
Obviously, this is recorded. We're happy to share the slides with you, as well as some handouts tonight about the new digital test and some comparisons between the SAT and ACT. I founded Bespoke 20 years ago in New York City. For the past 20 years, we've now worked with over 35,000 students in grades K through college, providing test preparation, academic support, executive function support, all sorts of things to help them in their academic journey. Our Westchester office for nearly a decade has been just 2 blocks away in Bronxville from the high school. We've been very happy to have a long relationship with the high school. So thank you again for having us here. As Aaron mentioned before we started, this is going to be really just a quick overview of some main differences between the ACT and SAT, the upcoming digital SAT changes. And I will be back on March 14th to do a deeper dive into the tests. This might be a good time for students to be there as well. We're going to take a look at some actual test questions, kind of see some of the differences between the tests and really get into the weeds a bit. So tonight, again, how do we make an informed decision between these 2 tests? You do not need both the ACT and SAT together to apply to college. In fact, with test optionality right now, you may not need either one. But we believe that making an informed decision if you are going to take these tests is important. And we also think that for many students, they will benefit from taking one of these tests for certain school applications, even if they don't end up submitting the test to every school that they apply to. This year in particular for 10th graders is an important year because the digital SAT is coming up next spring when your students are all in junior year. So I want to talk about that a little bit as well. It relates to the testing calendar that you see here. You'll see at the bottom of this slide, these are the test dates currently set up for the SAT and ACT. You'll notice that in most months, either the SAT or ACT is offered. Some months they're offered together, usually not on the same day. And just again, to was something I said on the last slide, you do not need both of these tests. Every test is accepted by colleges with absolutely no preference whatsoever. Probably about 54, I think it was last few years, 54% of the country was taking the ACT and the other percent was taking the SAT. For us as we prep students, it's probably about 50-50. So again, really this is about picking the test that is best for you. The reason why this calendar is important, particularly this year, is typically some rising juniors, which are all of your kids, might consider taking their taking their SATs by, for example, by December, getting them out of the way by Christmas time. I do think it makes sense in general for most students to wait at least until the spring of junior year to take their first test, because they're older, they're more mature, they've been at school longer, they will generally do better. In this particular instance, the paper and pencil test of the SAT, which is the current test, will be administered until December, through the December test date. And then as of the March test date, 2024, all the tests will be digital. So, this is important to think about as you consider which test to take and when. We'll talk about some reasons why it probably is extra advisable just to wait until next spring to do your testing, particularly this year. So let's just talk for a second about the current ACT. The ACT is really the constant here. The ACT was formed in 1969. It's headquartered in Iowa. The ACT has basically been unchanged for the last 50 years, and it still has the same sections, still has pretty much the same format, same scoring. It is still a paper and pencil test. In general, things you should know about the ACT is it's a 3.5-hour test. The new digital SAT is going to be a lot shorter. We'll talk about that in a second. The big thing that is different with the ACT from the SAT in general right now, and also for the digital test, is the ACT is jam-packed with a lot of reading. So students who read quickly, they can move through the test quickly, looking for words, looking for phrases, doing word searches. They can do very well on the ACT given the time pressure and the reading. The reading and the questions tend to be pretty straightforward. So there's not a lot of sort of nuance or game playing to do. Again, if students are quick readers and can do quick word searching, they can generally feel very comfortable with the ACT. The math section is entirely multiple choice. There's a lot of algebra and geometry, but it also goes up through some trigonometry. And students can use calculators throughout the test. There is also a science section on the ACT, which essentially is reading comprehension with charts and data. Do not let the science section turn off students from taking this test. You don't have to know pretty much any science at all to do well on that. What is coming up with the SAT? So starting in March of 2024, the new test is going to be digital and section adaptive. I will explain that on the next set of slides. It's going to be much shorter. It's going to be 2 hours and 15 minutes instead of 3 hours and 30 minutes. And it's going to give students actually more time to answer each question. There are fewer questions in the test overall. Obviously, having fewer questions impacts the curves. And what we've seen so far is that if you get just a few questions wrong, your score can drop much more quickly than it does on the current paper and pencil version. The big change to the SAT, which also is going to make it different from the current ACT, is that there is going to be reading, but the reading passages are going to be short. I will show you an example of that soon. Reading passages are just going to, in general, be single short paragraphs paired with a single question. The new things coming up are that there's going to be some poetry, some Shakespeare, some logic questions about someone did research and asked a range of things that they could interpret from their research. The math modules are going to allow calculators for the first time. The current paper and pencil test only allows calculators on half of the math. And the digital test platform, from what we've seen so far, is really excellent. There is going to be a built-in calculator. It's easy to use. It even solves equations for you. We think students will be very comfortable with that, even though they can use their own calculators for the test. Students can also use scrap paper, and there's an annotation tool that will allow students to annotate and highlight reading as they go through. The other benefit to the new digital test next year is you're going to get your scores within days instead of within weeks. So that should be very helpful for most students. So what does this mean to be section adaptive? And again, this is something we'll take a deeper dive into on March 14th. Essentially, the test is going to have two sections. The grammar and writing section that is currently on the paper and pencil test is going to be merged with the reading section. We're going to refer to this now as sort of verbal. It's a reading writing section 1. There are going to be 4 types of questions. 2 of those domains or types of questions, oops, sorry about that, are going to be about reading comprehension. 2 of them are going to be about grammar and writing. Module 1 is what the students are going to first see. It has 27 questions in it. It has 32 minutes to go through it. Every student who takes the SAT is going to sit down and have the exact same module 1. And then depending on how they do on module 1, they will either be served up a module 2 that is easier or a module 2 that is harder. That is where the section adaptive nature of the test comes from. So again, everyone will have the same module 1. People will get a different module 2 depending on how they do on module 1. So you can loosely think of this as an adaptive test, right? It gets easier, it gets harder depending on your performance. Overall, students can have a score between 200 and 800 on this test, just like they would get a verbal score out of 800 on the current SAT. The math is going to work in exactly the same way. Section 2 is going to be math. There are going to be 4 different domains or general types of math questions, from algebra through geometry and some trigonometry. Again, all students will have the same module 1, 22 questions in 35 minutes. Depending on how they do on module 1, they will get served up a harder or an easier module 2, which will also have 22 questions, 35 minutes. In all of these modules, students will be able to go back and forth between questions. You will not be able to go back and forth between modules, just like you can't go back and forth between sections of the test today. But within a given module, a given section, you will be able to go back and forth. You'll be able to flag questions for review. It's a very, very user-friendly platform from what we can see. We think that students will be very familiar with it, but it really does mean that they are going to need to do several practice tests before they go in for the real test. They really need to get used to the platform before they go in there and actually do a real test. So in general, if we just look at the tests right now, again, the ACT is a 3.5-hour test. It's got 4 sections: English, math, reading, and science. You can ignore the bottom part about the optional essay. No one does that for the ACT. You don't have to worry about that. It's there because certain states have ACT mandated as part of their curriculum, and in those states, some students need to do the essays. In the new digital SAT, reading and writing are going to have 2 modules, 32 minutes each. Math will have 2 modules, 35 minutes each. Again, overall, that test is going to be 2 hours and 15 minutes. So much, much shorter than the current paper and pencil SAT, which is 3.5 hours, same as the ACT. So how is the ACT scored? ACT has always scored the same way. You get a score out of 36 for each of your sections: English, math, reading, and science. Have no idea why they picked 36. It's sort of like getting an 800 on the SAT. You also get a composite score, which is the average of your 4 section scores. And if you submit your ACT scores to the colleges, they actually do see the subsection scores. They also see your composite score. And generally, students will lose a point out of 36 for every 2 to 3 questions that they get wrong in each of the sections. How is the digital SAT going to be scored? Pretty much identically to the current SAT. You're going to get a verbal score out of 800. You're going to get a math score out of 800 for 1,600 total. You may wonder why there's a 200 sitting there. You essentially get 200 for signing your name and going in. And so if you didn't fill anything out and just walked out, you probably get a 200 on it. That's not going to do very much for you. This is the thing to consider about the digital SAT. Obviously, we said that all the students get the same module number 1, and they get an easier or a harder module 2. One of the things that seems to be clear so far is that if you are given an easier module 2 for the verbal section or the math section, and you're not always going to know which you got, that means your score on that section is going to top out at around 600. So if you don't do that well on section 1, on module 1, and you get the easier module 2, that means that the maximum you can probably get on that for reading and writing or for math is going to be a score of 600 out of 800. The harder module 2 gives you an extra potential 150 or more points. And so again, the students who are going to be able to get those 800s are the ones who are doing well enough on section 1 to be served up that harder module 2 and get that potential maximum score. So what that means is that with the digital SAT, not all the questions are created equal. On the current paper and pencil SAT, just as on the current ACT, all questions count the same. On the new digital SAT, actually, certain questions are essentially worth more than others. Getting those first questions right is probably more important for your overall score because it's going to lead you to a harder module 2 than getting the last questions right. Once you get into that harder module 2, you have a little bit more flexibility. It's not clear where the cutoff is. It's not clear that you can game the system. I think the focus in sort of test prep for this test is going to be, how do you get as many questions right? Particularly, how do you get those easier questions right? From everything that we've seen so far, and our tutors have begun to take some of the digital SATs already released by the College Board. There are 4 of them on the College Board website. Bespoke has produced 2 of them that will be launching soon on our digital partner platform. And we're going to have many more by the fall and by next spring. There'll be plenty to practice with. What we've seen so far is actually that a lot of the math is easier than the paper and pencil version, and much of the reading and verbal part is easier. So we think that it makes sense for most students, even though they'll be sort of pioneers with this new test, we think that it generally will make sense for students to wait until the test, the new digital SAT next March, rather than try to scramble and get a paper and pencil SAT done by December. Again, you should talk to your college counselors and figure out what works best for you. This next slide, don't panic. We're not going to go through this all. I just want to show you something as an illustration. We said that the reading on the ACT is a lot. This is a typical example of what a reading passage looks like on the ACT, how long it is. Each reading passage comes with 10 long questions. Students who don't have extra time or any accommodations have 8.5 minutes to do the reading and answer these 10 questions. They have 4 of these passages to do on the test. 8.5 minutes is not a long time to do all this reading and answer these questions. In contrast, just to show you what the new digital SAT is going to look like, you can see here, this is actually a passage with 2 different single paragraph texts. In fact, most of the passages on the digital SAT will just be a single paragraph like text 1, followed by a single question. This happens to be a passage with a comparison between 2 texts. There are a few of those on the digital SAT, but most of them will be very short. So you can see a major difference between the ACT reading and the SAT reading. We'll go more into that March 14th if you're interested, but I just wanted to point that out there for you in terms of students and their reading. So what do we do and what should students be thinking about? Studying for the SAT and ACT is different from your school tests. It's not just about learning content, it's about learning strategy, timing skills, what you use on each problem. I often make the analogy that studying for these tests is more like learning a sport or learning a musical instrument. You want to adapt some skills or learn some skills that are going to make you rather robotic and automatic taking these tests. seeing certain types of questions, learning what to do, and doing them over and over and over again so that you get used to the same types of questions. So this is something that we do with our tutoring and in our classes. And the biggest thing that students can do is actually practice and take lots of practice exams. If students are doing tutoring for this or test prep, once they start, we generally want them to think about this like they would think of their piano lessons or soccer practice, practicing every day, having some consistency, and taking at least a few, ideally 4 to 6 full-length practice tests before they go into their official tests. Getting comfortable with time, trying to figure out what areas they need to improve on. Something that we've done at the high school for a long time is we've offered mock testing. We actually do it through a fundraiser event. There's an ACT event March 25th, an SAT April 23rd. We've just sent out some flyers about this. We've already gotten some responses. And this is something where juniors can take tests to see how they're doing, and sophomores can also join them and take tests. At the moment, both of these tests are slated to be paper and pencil versions of the ACT and SAT, although we are hoping, and we will discuss with the school and let people know, we're hoping to be able to offer a digital SAT for those 10th graders who are interested in it this April. If we don't, we'll certainly offer one in the fall for students who would like to do that in school, in person. And again, this is just an opportunity to familiarize yourself with the test, improve your time management, and gain confidence. So again, we always finish with this slide. There's always plenty of anxiety to go around studying for these tests, thinking about them. This is the first year of some big changes to the SAT in a long time. Bespoke has done a lot of this with a lot of kids and a lot of schools. We look forward to working with you and with Bronxville over the next year and a half. We're available for questions. You've got a wonderful college team who's also available for questions. Please feel free to reach out, and we're happy to answer any of your questions. I did see a question posted just now about, will the PSAT in the fall be paper and pencil? So no, the PSAT for juniors, rising juniors this fall is going to be the first digital PSAT that's been offered. We don't have a lot of details on that yet. We presume that it will be shorter and easier than the 2 hour and 15-minute digital SAT, because that's always been what the PSAT is. But it will be a digital test, and more details I'm sure will be sent out by the school about that. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides. We welcome questions if we have some time, and thank you so much for listening. Thank you again to the school for having us here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tim. That was great. I guess I was also going to chime in to say that the fall PSAT is going to be on a computer, and so we will offer that test, and depending upon what the College Board says, have devices for students. I feel like there's even a mention of like a bring your own device type of testing situation. But you have to appreciate that the College Board sort of sends out information in drips and drabs. And so I am very appreciative of Tim for putting all of that together, because it's kind of, in October, a piece of information comes out. In December, a little bit more comes out. So Tim and his team there have been doing an awesome job of gathering all of that. And, needless to say, the March event will be that much more illuminative of, sort of what to do and not to do and how to prepare for whichever tests you decide to take. And I do imagine, and Tim, I don't know if you want to chime in on this, I do imagine there'll be people, I think your point is well made, that rushing to take the paper and pencil test is not ideal. And I think the key word there is the rush. If you're ready for a paper and pencil test, you probably say take it. It sounds like your early sort of takeaway is that maybe the digital test will be easier, so there might be some value in waiting. I can already anticipate people trying to figure out which is going to be easier and how I'm going to do better and which test to take. And, quite frankly, there will be students that do both, right? And, the colleges will accept both scores. There was a period of time where they changed the scoring, and colleges accepted the 1600 versus the 2400, and now it's back to 1600. This is all to say, I think it's going to be a case-by-case decision for each student. We saw as a school during the online AP exams that students, while very comfortable with taking tests on a computer, maybe didn't take them as seriously as we would have hoped. This might be different for an SAT, but things to keep in mind when you think about your child and how they sort of respond to tests and testing modalities. And I wanted to make the mock SAT and ACT in person this year in our school to give students that experience of like getting up a little bit early, coming to a school, having to sit at a chair for 3 hours, and sort of give them that real world experience. A lot of those things are lost when you put a computer in front of them and ask them to then take the SAT.
I would just add two things. Thank you, Aaron. One is that students who have accommodations will also have accommodations for the new test. There still will be extra time. And in fact, for students who have, which we think will be rather rare, there will be students who will be allowed an accommodation to take a linear paper and pencil version of the digital test instead of actually being on the computer at all. So again, we think that that accommodation will be rather rare. We do think that there will be plenty of students who will have extra time for this test, and will have that. The other point to quickly make is that the College Board has already come out and said that they are making the scales for this new digital test exactly the same as the scales for the paper and pencil, which means if you do take a paper and pencil in the fall and you do take the new one next spring, they have said that these scales and scores will be identical for the colleges. Now, we'll see how the colleges accept that, but in theory, the two tests are interchangeable according to the College Board.
Right. So there's another question. Yeah, so I think the idea, and Tim, you can maybe riff off of this a little bit, the idea of offering both the mock exam for the ACT and the SAT, would you say students should do both of them? Like, there is the idea not to sort of understand the two different tests and figure out which is best suited for me as a student, or should I just, to the panel, to the question, should I wait for the electronic version of the SAT if I know I'm going to do that? Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we're getting asked that question a lot. I mean, my feeling is that the content, even though the format is going to be slightly different on the digital SAT and shorter, the content is largely going to be pretty much the same, especially in math. And so, any opportunities for practice are probably helpful. I think that if your student is willing to sit for 3 hours out of their week and just sit and take the paper and pencil SAT, again, we will probably offer some digital version in April, but we'll talk to the school about that. But in either case, sitting and doing some extra tests, whether or not they're of the exact same format right now as you'll eventually take in a year, I still think that they make sense and they're a good practice. You're going to be exposed to the test questions. You're going to get a sense of what these tests look like. I don't think it will hurt. And as long as you go in with the right knowledge and attitude.
Awesome. So I think we're going to wrap up. I just also want to mention, and again, we appreciate Tim and Bespoke's time and generosity. They do also, and this is on the flyer, which I sent out earlier today, and we'll send out again tomorrow. They do give you some type of score analysis for both exams if you choose to do both exams. And that, those results, like parents often ask me and the counselors, which test should my child take? And frankly, the only way to know is to take a mock test of both of them and sort of take a quick look at your results. So this is the way to do that. This is why these things are offered and why Bespoke and others continue to offer mock testing. I will follow up with everybody tomorrow with the slides from today, Tim's slides, the flyer that we alluded to for the registration form, and more information about the mock SAT and ACT. I will also send out the document which Alyssa referred to, that lists the summer courses at the universities that we've compiled. I do, again, I'm sorry. Well, I'm not sorry that it snowed, but I'm sorry that we couldn't do it in person. It would have been great to see everybody. I thank you all for joining us. Again, March 14th, we're going to do a follow-up with Tim. In April, we are going to have an in-person mock admissions committee event. So be on the lookout for that specific date and time. It looks like there are no more questions in the Q&A, but we'll give it a long pause here. But otherwise, thank you all for joining us. Have a good evening, and we'll see you soon. Looks like we got one.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, thank you. All right. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, everybody.
Have a good night.